Tony Trischka. Welcome to this Countryland small chat session. Great for you to take some time out for us, and welcome to this beautiful country, the Netherlands.
Thank you. It's a totally beautiful country. I love the Netherlands, so I'm very glad to be here. Thank you.
Have you been here before?
I've been here 3 or 4 times before. I was here maybe 2 years ago with my wife. We were on holiday in Amsterdam and just had an amazing time. So
yeah,
I love the Netherlands. It's so good to be in Rotterdam.
Yeah, great. Yes, the Rotterdam Bluegrass Festival, that's where we are right now. And you will be playing a set tonight with Mike Marshall. And, of course, we all know you, the man who is playing the banjo.
That's what I do.
For quite a few years. How did your interest in the banjo start? Were you involved in music and then discovered the banjo? How did it all start for you?
It took me 3 other instruments before I got to the banjo. When I was a kid, I took flute lessons. That's how I started. Piano lessons, and then I started taking guitar lessons because this was in the late 1950s, early 1960s, because folk music was really big. We call it the folk music scare, but there was a big folk music boom that had the Kingston Trio and the Brothers Four and the Limelighters and the Weavers and people like that, and then Bob Dylan later on and Joan Baez and on and on. So I started playing folk guitar, and then I discovered Doc Watson and started playing some flat picking and some of his finger picking things. And then I heard this group, the Kingston Trio, play a song called The MTA. And there was a banjo solo in there by their banjoist Dave Gard, who was a wonderful banjo player. And that solo on that one song, there were 16 notes in that solo that made me play the banjo. And I was gone, and I just put down the guitar and bothered my parents till they bought me a banjo for Christmas, and that was it. And before, they wouldn't give me the banjo till Christmas Day, so I took my guitar and tuned it like a banjo, and got a hold of this Pete Seeger banjo instruction book, and tried to work out of that. So that's how I got into it.
Okay, and so you're talking about folk music, and then kind of transitioned into bluegrass.
Right.
Yeah. So how did that evolve? How did that come to?
Well,
bluegrass?
I associated the banjo with all these folk bands because almost all these folk bands had a banjo player in them. Again, the Kingston Trio had their banjo player. The Limelighters had a guy named Alex Hasselev who played the banjo. The Brothers Four had a banjo player. All these bands had banjos in them. But I wanted to find out where you could hear more of the style that I heard on that one solo. And someone said, "Oh, listen to this man, Earl Scruggs." And, oh, okay, Earl Scruggs. Oh, I can remember that name. And I found a Flatt and Scruggs album, bought that. And they had just done a folk album where they did, I don't know if they did This Land Is Your Land, but they did some folk songs on there. And so it was kind of an easy transition. And also Lester Flatt had kind of a mellow voice, and Earl Scruggs played killer banjo. So it was a perfect combination to get into it, because Bill Monroe or the Stanley Brothers would have been a little too hard-edged, I think, for me at that point. But once I got into the Flatt and Scruggs, then it was easy to leap over to the more, not deeper stuff, but, Bill Monroe invented the music, so it was easy to get into him and the Stanley Brothers from there.
Yeah, okay, I see. Yeah, and then getting involved much more and more over time, you started to get involved with bands. You started recording at one time with the band Country Cooking.
Right.
So from being interested in music, playing instruments, learning to play the banjo, the next step, getting involved in groups and playing. You've been involved in many different groups.
Right.
Can you talk to me about that a bit?
Of the different groups I've been in?
Yeah, through history.
Well, you mentioned Country Cooking. It was a band that was started in a town that was about an hour from where I grew up and where I was living. And I got friendly with their banjo player, Pete Warnick, and I joined their group. And then there was a company called Rounder Records, who became a very influential roots music label. And 2 of the people that started Rounder Records lived in Ithaca, New York, where Country Cooking started. And so Pete Warnick said, "Hey, we have a band. Will you put an album out on us?" And they said, "Okay." So we spent a couple of afternoons with a small tape recorder and recorded a whole album. And that was the first album I was ever on. And then we did a second album. We did 2 more albums for Rounder in regular studios after that. And then I was in a group at the same time called Country Granola. It was a sports rock group. You've never heard of sports rock, probably.
Not
No.
before I read about it in your bio.
Yeah,
No, so
sports rock is very obscure.
Yeah.
We did football medleys, basketball medleys,
Okay.
Baseball medleys.
But all instrumental.
No,
I mean acoustic. Acoustic music. Yeah.
Well, actually, no, we had drums in the band also,
Okay,
and I played some pedal steel guitar as well as banjo.
Okay. Yeah.
But anyway, I was in that band, and then I moved to New York City to play with a group called Breakfast Special, and these were all like-minded people who thought the way I did about, like, okay, here's bluegrass, but what can we do with it? Where can we take it that's different? And so we started writing tunes. We worked together and wrote tunes and had arrangements that were a little beyond, not beyond like in a negative way, but just maybe a little more sophisticated than bluegrass. And I'm not saying that as a put on bluegrass, because bluegrass is a very sophisticated music too, and very subtle and has all sorts of amazing things. But sophisticated isn't even the right word, but fancier chords, more chords, and maybe take a bluegrass tune and put a rock and roll beat to it, and just toying with things. And I could go on, and I've been with other bands too. So
Yeah.
but that kind of, I started with those
Yeah.
3 bands, really being in a band.
Okay. You've been involved in some other things beside playing bands in your musical career. I'm reading something about a musical leader on a Broadway show.
Right. I was in a show called The Robber Bridegroom, which is a bluegrass musical in 1976.
A bluegrass musical.
Bluegrass musical.
Wow.
I mean, in that the band played, it was a bluegrass band.
Mm-hmm.
I played banjo. The guy that played guitar on Dueling Banjos, the hit that everybody knows, he was in that band playing guitar. Steve Mandel was his name.
Okay.
We had 2 fiddles, bass, and that was the band. And so some of it was just flat out bluegrass, and then other tunes were more Broadway oriented. But they had but we were a bluegrass band playing acoustically, and we were on stage in the show. And I was the musical leader, which just meant that when the union had to talk to us, they would talk to me, or if the director had to talk to us, they would talk through me, and I would talk to the musicians. So, yeah.
Okay, interesting. And that was all on Broadway? Did
It was
you
on
also
Broadway.
tour?
We did 2 months in L.A., in Los Angeles, at a place called the Mark Taper Forum, and it was a big hit out there. And then we moved to Broadway for 5 months,
Okay.
again around 1976. And then it did tour some, and I did a couple of little tours with it
Okay.
as I went around from other cities.
Yeah. Okay. Then another chapter in your life with John Denver.
Mm-hmm.
We know many people who know John Denver probably know that he's done a few films, few movies.
Right.
You've been involved in one.
Yeah,
Foxfire.
It was called Foxfire, and a man named Hume Cronin, Hume, Hume Cronin, he wrote it along with this woman from Boston, and Hume Cronin and his wife Jessica Tandy starred in it. And we did it in Los Angeles. It was on Broadway for a while, but I did it with them in Los Angeles, in Denver and Los Angeles, for about 2 months, with Keith Carradine playing the part of their son. But then they decided they wanted to do it for American television, for CBS, and for the Hallmark Hall of Fame. And they got John Denver to be their son, who was a musician, and we were his backup band. So we got to play with John Denver as part of this show that was on television, national television in America. Yeah. And he was a very nice man. And we first filmed a bar scene. He's singing in this bar in the show, and we're his backup band. And so we got there before he got there to start filming, and he shows up and, hi, John Denver. We know you're John Denver. But he was very nice, very humble, and which you like to hear about someone like that. And then the next day they filmed him singing in front of a crowd of about 300 people in a Grange hall, just kind of this big hall in Georgia. And they got all these people just to show up to hear a John Denver concert, but they filmed it. And so they would film him singing one song with us backing him up. And then he just gave a John Denver concert, because they always have to take another 15 minutes to reset the cameras and try different camera angles. So he would just do some of his music, and we backed him up, Country Roads and just all of his hits. So we got to actually play a whole show with him as part of this, while they were filming. During the downtime, he would just do his songs.
Yeah.
And the people loved it. And, of course, for us, what a treat. We got to be in John Denver's backup band.
Right.
And he was a very nice guy and very talented, and everything you'd think.
Yeah.
So it was a great experience.
I watched a few scenes of the movie the other day, and to me, it kind of like that John Denver was going bluegrass.
Yeah, that's kind of what it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in the bar scene, we did a Stanley Brothers song, just
Yeah.
while we were waiting to change the cameras around. And I got to sing harmony with John Denver on this, just kidding around, just kind of, let's do something while we're waiting. So, do you know this? Oh, yeah, I know that. And we did it. And I can't really sing, but, when you sing with John Denver, he makes you sound better.
And it looks good.
Yeah, exactly,
It looked
exactly.
Good. Absolutely.
So it was fun.
Yeah. Going a bit more classical. Shakespeare in the Park. And when I see Shakespeare, then I'm thinking of classical literature. Is that the connection?
Yeah, well,
is that the Shakespeare? Or
it's the Shakespeare. What happened is I got a call from Steve Martin, because I've gotten friendly with him over the years and worked with him, and they have something in New York City called the Public Theater.
Yeah.
And what they try to do during the summers, they put on Shakespeare Shakespeare plays in Central Park in New York City, and the idea is that it's free. You don't have to pay for it. You have to wait in line. You get in line in the morning, and after 3 or 4 hours, you get to get a ticket. If you're there first, if you get there early enough, you can get a free ticket. And that was the thing, because Shakespeare is always in fancy theaters, and it costs a lot of money. And this man, Joseph Papp, who started the Public Theater, wanted to make theater available, high-level theater available to everyone, even the people who have no money. They could see a Shakespeare play. So we did As You Like It, and Steve Martin wrote some songs for it, and he wanted me to play banjo on it, and I put a band together for that. So we did Shakespeare in the Park, and we were sort of kidding around, and some great actors. I mean, this is like serious actors, and Meryl Streep has done it in the past, just to name one name. But there were no big stars in this production, but really good actors nonetheless. But someone in the band said, I should say, to pick or not to pick, to be or not to be, but to pick or not to pick, the banjo. And we went to the director and said, can Tony say this? Can we give him this line? And he said, okay, we'll try it for one show. And so right in the middle of the show, I get to say, to pick or not to pick. Yeah. And then, and I delivered the line. And then the next morning we had notes where, he talks to the actors, oh, let's change this. And he started with, okay, Tony, we're cutting your line. Like, oh. So for one evening, I was a Shakespearean actor for to pick or not to pick. What's that, 1 second?
Yeah, to pick or not to pick. I'm trying to imagine.
You can only imagine. And we're in costume,
the connection between Shakespeare and Bluegrass.
I just made it for you. I just told you the connection. You never expect that.
You told me the connection. I'm trying to picture it. But
right, and I put a band together for that, and there was a fiddle player and a bass player and banjo and guitar. So
yeah, wonderful.
Yeah,
great. Okay, you're also teaching.
I'm teaching
the banjo, the Tony Trischka School of Banjo.
Mm-hmm.
People can go to the website, and you're teaching people all over the world.
Yeah, there's a company called Artist Works, and they started this concept of online teaching. I'm not saying other people didn't do it before, but they do it on a very high level. Just the technology of it, and they asked me to be the banjo teacher. I mean, they've got classical instruments, they've got hip hop, record scratching, they've got jazz and rock. They got all, and I was the first in the bluegrass bunch. They got me to do it first, and then I suggested other names for them to try, including Mike Marshall. Excuse me. So he's doing it also. And the idea is, I went out to Napa, California, which is where they're based, where the company's based, and I filmed 150 lessons. And the idea is the lessons should be short, 5 to 7 minutes long. You learn a tune or you learn a technique, and then you get that, and then you move on to the next technique, as opposed to you buy a 160-page book, and you start here, but you got this whole book to go through, or a video, a 90-minute video, and they're all really important, and they're great ways to learn, but psychologically, I got this whole book to go through. Whereas this is these bite-sized bits. You learn this one tune for 6 minutes, then you go into a separate entity, which is the next tune or the next technique. So, and then I've done interviews with over 40 people, like 45 people, all the top players. And you can once you subscribe to this, you can see all those interviews. And then the really nice thing is people can send videos to me, and then it's not Skype, but it goes into a queue, and then I'm on the road right now, so I'm not doing videos, but when I get home, I'll get caught up. And people send a video of them playing, and then I critique it. and say, "You sound great, but you're missing this," or "It all sounds great." Period. And that's it. So anyway,
so they get their feedback from you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Good feedback.
Your style of banjo playing. I mean, you told us earlier about how you got involved in playing the banjo. From the start, I think you developed and maybe you created your own style, but you made an important contribution to the development of banjo playing. Can you talk about that a bit?
You know, it's funny. I never thought about it. I didn't try to do anything different, but it kind of came out that way. I started playing in 1963. In 1965, I entered this banjo contest at the very first Bluegrass Festival in Fincastle, Virginia. And Ralph Stanley was one of the judges, and then Bill Monroe's banjo player, and then someone else, a guy named Bill Emerson who played with Jimmy Martin. Very traditional banjo players. Yeah. And so I played 9-pound hammer, straight ahead bluegrass tune, but I put some fake Middle Eastern modes in there. And I can only imagine Ralph Stanley going, "What?" I lost badly, I know. The kid that won played Foggy Mountain Breakdown note for note perfectly, and he was great. But I didn't have a chance of winning. So even after playing for 2 years, I was trying some weird stuff, like putting these Middle Eastern modes. And, you know, I grew up in Syracuse, New York. I didn't grow up down in the South. And my parents listened to Broadway shows, and they listened to Stravinsky and, you know, folk music. And so and jazz, my father.
So you had other influences.
I had all these other influences. I didn't grow up in rural Kentucky or something like that. So when I fell in love with traditional bluegrass, which I did, and I'm still in love with traditional bluegrass, but I started adding these other elements into it. And then during the 60s, listening to the Beatles and the Beach Boys with Van Dyke Parks and Hendrix and Zappa and, you know, just the ferment, all this exciting new music that had never existed on this planet before. And I'm right there being able to hear all this new music. And it inspired me to try to, take chances with bluegrass. And rather than have 3 chords, let's throw in some extra chords. Or let me add a saxophone to this, or let me add a synthesizer to this. So I was trying things just because it was that time in society where everybody was trying stuff, and I was caught up in all the excitement of that. So that, you know, coming at bluegrass from a different angle, it was very important for me. And, you know, those battles have all been won. You know, but people used to get these, you know, really terrible reviews in Bluegrass Unlimited. If this is the sort of thing you like, this is the sort of thing you like. But it's, you know,
once you're in it, you're not
right,
out
exactly.
anymore. No. So another great story about doing a contest, losing bad, like you say yourself,
right?
But getting back up, and here we are.
Yeah, you got
so
to
many years
keep
later,
away.
and the great man Tony Trischka that you are on the banjo. So absolutely fabulous. It's absolutely great having you here and talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You will be having a great show tonight with Mike.
I'm glad to hear that.
We'll be looking forward to it. And well, we hope to see you again sometime again in the future.
Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thank you.